Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong. I'm 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿. In this conversation on Groong episode, we'll be talking about security and telecommunications in Armenia. Our guest is an expert in security and has spent over 8 years as chief corporate counsel for one of the biggest telecommunications companies in Armenia. Before we start, please help us increase our reach by subscribing and liking us on whatever platform you listen to us on, and help spread the word by sharing this podcast on your social media channels. Thanks in advance. Our guest today is David Sandukhjan, who is a lawyer with 20 years of experience in telecommunications, cyber law, media, and personal data protection. He was chief counsel for over 8 years at Beeline. David is a certified ISO information security auditor and works as an independent consultant out of Toronto, Canada. Welcome and thanks for joining us again, David.
Thank you for having me.
So what prompted our discussion today was recent news about Caucasus Online, a telecommunication operator in Georgia, and attempts by an Azeri company to acquire a stake in this company. We'll talk about more details, but I think our readers or our listeners would enjoy a brief background to the story. So can you give us a high-level background of the state of telecommunications sector in Armenia and anything historical, major facts that we need to know?
Yeah, that's a good way to do, because the present situation with telecom in Armenia was predefined by two factors: the geography and the geopolitical situation of Armenia, and second, the history of the telecommunication, how it was developed in late 19th and continued through the last 20 years. I started my career in telecommunication law in 2001, shortly after purchase of Armenian incumbent operator by the Greek state-owned company 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿. 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿 managed to get very exclusive agreement on provision of telecommunication services on monopoly basis, almost entire range of telecom services, including mobile, fixed line, landline telecommunication, and also international voice and data connectivity. That actually predefined further development of Armenian telecommunication and significantly slowed it down till 2005. In 2005, Armenian government remained the owner of 10%, but in fact, that 10% of shares didn't provide Armenian authorities any power to define the policy and operation of the company. There are many disputes and conflict between Armenian authorities and management of ArmenTel for different reasons.
I think one of the reasons was that 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿 had committed itself to a certain level of investment, and the government complained that they were not meeting those investment targets. But like you said, they did not have enough power to force the company into doing whatever they had committed to.
Yes, they do have power, but they also didn't fulfill their own obligations. So there was mutual default. So Armenian government promised or committed to introduce call metering system in 1999, I think. But kindly asked 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿 to postpone metering phone calls because there were upcoming elections and the political situation was very unstable, and government tried to please the population with minimal raise of tariffs on gas, water, or whatever. 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿 agreed, but they asked for other benefits. So they say, okay, then you should extend some mandatory provisions of license, like telephonization of rural areas and development of non-for-profit areas. I mean, rural areas where investment return was very low. So there was way of mutual compromises, but one day Armenian government decided that it's time to open market because OT were doing very bad. The communication was awful. The mobile connectivity reached its top of load per stations and actually was not able to grow anymore. Mobile coverage out of Yerevan was very rare. You hardly you hardly might use that time mobile in such a tourist area as in Sevan or Dilijan or say Garni even.
And even if you could, I think the prices were exorbitant.
Yes, and the prices were very high. Armenia was one of the highest, had one of the highest prices over the region. And the government decided to somehow to find a way to liberalize at least mobile communication because that time internet services were not that profitable. So mobile was the main driver of a telecommunication industry. After long disputes over the 2 years, they settled the disputes with agreement that Armenian government introduced second license. ArmenTel remained monopoly of fixed telephony and international connectivity, both voice and data. So the new operator, which was Vimpelcom, they have the right to provide mobile communication services on the entire territory of the country, but without international access. International access has been granted later. When in 2000, and the Greek company, Greeks decide to sell out the shares because further competition required investment. OT decided to quit the whole South Caucasus market because they were co-owners of 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐨𝐬 and Black Sea Cable, co-owner, the major co-owner, the cable we are going to talk about today. And they quit the region and they were willing to sell it as soon as possible. Russian company Beeline purchased ArmenTel in 2007 with significant change in exclusive rights, and that's where and then the competitive market in Armenia started. So the Beeline traded its exclusive rights for 10% of state-owned shares, and competition started from that moment. That is time when new competitors entered the market, and third operator Orange, French Telecom, and 𝐒𝐞𝐜𝐿 became another two lead operators on the market. So we can say that's the second important year of Armenian telecommunication, 2008-2010. That's the history on brief, I would say. Now we have three telecom operators: MTS, Russian-owned MTS, Vimpelcom.
And recently, Orange exited the market, correct?
Yes, Orange exited the market. I think Orange made a marketing mistake. They expected substantial growth, not the substantial growth. They expected to grab a big portion of data market, but they failed because other two operators appeared well prepared, and both ArmenTel and MTS responded adequately. So Orange was the third operator and remains such till now. I mean, after purchase by the 𝐒𝐞𝐿.
You mentioned 𝐒𝐞𝐿, and there's some recent news about 𝐒𝐞𝐿, which we'll cover probably in a separate podcast. But can you tell us when 𝐒𝐞𝐿 first appeared on the market, and what is its current position?
𝐒𝐞𝐿 appeared in 2008 as a fiber optic operator. He became shortly main competitor for ArmenTel Beeline because that was a very dynamic company built by two brothers, 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿𝐮𝐬. They are still owners of 5%, but main capital of 𝐒𝐞𝐿 came from famous personality in Armenia, 𝐂𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿𝐻, his family. 𝐂𝐞𝐥𝐿's family is the major owner of the 𝐒𝐞𝐿 till now. Formerly, the owners are 𝐂𝐞𝐥𝐿's sons, but everybody knows that 𝐂𝐞𝐥𝐿, as a head of tax authority, was one of the powerful and pretty rich person in Armenia.
And they're currently in criminal cases around that related to corruption. So
he's now in a jail, accused in I think not the corruption or but the misuse of state budget, state-owned money, and his sons is accused in corruption, and now he's out of the country, and he's the police looking for him now. Yeah, so that's actually the main issue that 𝐒𝐞𝐿 has now.
let's talk about Caucasus Online and the efforts of an Azerbaijani company, Nexol, to acquire a 49% stake, and then we can pivot into a general discussion about telecommunication security.
Armenia always had a problem with international connectivity. In early 2000, Armenia has only one channel owned by ArmenTel and passing Georgia to Poti, through the entire country to Poti, and then to Bulgaria through the marine cable. That was the only communication channel of Armenia. There was a very tiny channel with Iran, but Iran itself doesn't have much redundancy over the region. So Iran is constantly, being under the sanctions, international sanctions, had all these problems with, transferring money, purchasing channels, etc. So now, to my best knowledge, substantial part of Iranian traffic goes through Armenia and Georgian channels. So it's really an issue, connecting the Europe. And Iran has another cables on the Asia part, but the traffic from Armenia is still very substantial. It's actually much cheaper. Armenia had that only connectivity through the Georgia, but there were not many attempts to get alternative. In 2012, I think, 11-12, U.S. Embassy started negotiation, started mediating process of constructing possible design and construction of cable between Armenia and Turkey. They invited operators to the U.S. Embassy. I was one of the representative of the deputy. I don't remember the name, but the deputy, first secretary of the embassy, discussed the possibilities. Is there an interest of Armenian operators to construct such a cable and to have at least some redundancy? And U.S. promised kind of guarantee that the cable will be secure and goes without interception, etc. Both ArmenTel and 𝐒𝐞𝐿 expressed their interest. Well, we said, okay, we may think about that. At least our headquarters in Moscow has no objection, but we want to assure that Armenian government will not object too, because this is the international relation issue. We don't have any diplomatic relations with Turkey. What if something happened on the border when we start digging it, or will we get permission to dig, etc.? Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs surprisingly responded positively, said, okay, yeah, sure, we have no objections, so you guys may dig there, and unless Turkey will against. Ankara formally responded positively to U.S. suggestion and mediation mission. They said, yes, sure, we have no objection, and we are very happy to have a connectivity with our, not very friendly, but still we hope that one day we may, some diplomatic, language.
Do you think that the football diplomacy happening at the time was one of the causes?
Yes, that was exactly the football diplomacy time. It was exactly that time. However, they never issue permission to Turkish operators to dig from their side, because all the times U.S. embassy or U.S. say mediators contacted Turkish operator, they said, yeah, okay, we will not respond officially. Officially, it's all fine. We just don't see any business there. That's our official response. Non-official, we have been told not to dig. So there were no willingness of Turkey to build that network, obviously. And I think U.S. spent a lot of effort, just a lot of efforts to try to negotiate all that process. Instead, Turkish operators built another alternative cable on the Georgia and Turkey border in Batumi. To my best knowledge, it's not very large bandwidth there, but part of the traffic, Georgian traffic, goes through that cable, I think, for redundancy purpose. So the Georgia has the best connectivity in the region because it connected with the Russia through Azerbaijan, it connected with the Russia direct, it connected with the Bulgaria and Turkey. So Georgia is a kind of hub for there. Armenia has the only alternative, the only way to route its traffic. It's through Caucasus Online, which now is the most capable and most advanced cable in the region, under the marine cable. Armenia cannot use Azerbaijan cable, which goes through railway from Georgia and Azerbaijan to Russia. And Armenia cannot use, from same political and security reasons, traffic that goes through Turkey. So the only let's say secure route is through Georgia Caucasus Online today. So that's today's situation. Armenian operators, actually very commercial companies, they don't think much about the security of the country. They think about the cheapest way to get to major international hubs like Frankfurt or Amsterdam. So they purchase the channel which is less expensive, more reliable, and etc. Speaking about the Georgian Caucasus Online cable, the purchase, I don't think it's very unsecure to route traffic through cable that co-owned by Azerbaijani businesses, for two reasons. First of all, it's not just an issue of Armenian security. It's also issue of Georgian security. Georgia is in the friendly relationships with Azerbaijan, but we know there is no friendship in international relations. So Georgia has its own issues, and it's tried to reduce both Turkey and Azerbaijan influence on the country economy as much as it's possible. It's not always possible. There's no major investments on there, but still, government authorities try to control that cable. It's like, I know how it operates from inside. So company has very serious control from the state. Even if you 100% Russia-owned company as a Beeline in Armenia, you're still under the pressure of the Armenian state authorities. You're still controlled very closely by national security, by defense ministry, by regulatory authority, and you don't have much room for maneuvers. So I mentioned that Armenian operators, both foreign-owned and locally owned EUCOM, were notified many times not to route the traffic through Azerbaijani and Turkey directions. So there is some control, and I hope that Georgia will keep substantial control over that operation of that cable. However, it's not secure from the perspective that Georgia still good friend of Azerbaijan. Not maybe good, but friends. They have a pretty good relationship and mutual interest.
David, are you aware of the details of the sale itself, and why is Georgia raising objections to it now?
Truly speaking, I don't know much. I think the main reason that telecommunication industry in general is in deep crisis right now. In the one hand, there is an increased demand on internet. In the other hand, the price went down recently, and it still goes down. So we feel it on even in Toronto, where I think the most expensive internet in the developed countries. I think I never expected to pay that much for internet and mobile telecommunication. It's like 10 times more than in Armenia and Russia. But still, it goes down in Toronto. There is a strong competition even in restricted Canadian markets. It's strong, even stronger competition in Europe. It's strong competition in US, I believe. So price go down. The companies need more and more investment in cable infrastructure. When American companies fight for net neutrality and they won, they announced that regime in US. Net neutrality is still a rule in Europe and most of the Eastern European countries. So the operators cannot charge big content providers like Google, Facebook, or let's say Netflix, or for priority routing or for something else. The only country I think more or less succeeded in that is France, but I think it's very, very weird experience. I don't think every country can do that. So that's the issue. Investment is a serious issue, and in many countries we see company mergers. Even in US, we saw recently approval of, I think, two major Comstar and Warner Brothers merger. So it's all over the world. The companies, the market is concentrated because companies need more money to invest. So I think that's one of the reasons why small countries operator like Armenia, Georgia, looking for bigger investors. During my career in VEON, when I moved to Amsterdam and was working as a government relations director in the headquarters of Beeline in Amsterdam, there were clear trend over the markets. We had three different merger in Pakistan, in Italy, and in Kyrgyzstan. So there was it's trended the telecommunication market, building a larger company to survive. So I think that's one of the reasons that why Georgians looked for, and there were many investors in that region.
So, David, do you think this stop that Georgia has put on the deal is more economical than political?
I think it's political now.
It's political.
I think political because I don't think that it's economically, well, I don't see any economical reason to stop that investment.
Okay, moving on, I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think are some of the biggest threats to national security in telecommunications, touching upon maybe both external and internal factors.
Let's start from external issues because we started from that, and it's maybe just logical to continue that way. Armenia is in very extraordinary situation there for both geographic and investment issue. Armenia is not the most attractive in terms of investment country right now, and we talked about that in our previous podcast, I guess, and I explained why it's so. But it's mainly not investment-friendly climate, insufficient protection of assets, investor assets, and investment themselves. I think that's the main reason why there are not many investors, foreign investors, and
maybe market size?
And the market size as well, of course. So what we see is that Armenia having a trouble with the connection redundancy, and definitely should undertake serious steps to achieve that. My vision is that government should should become a kind of coordinating point for operators' efforts to obtain cheap and reliable channels. Today, every operator tries to solve its international connectivity problems by himself, or in the best case with the support of foreign investments, their own investment, the shareholders actually. Both, as I mentioned, there are actually four major operators, 3 mobile and three landline operators, and one which is not mobile. It's a Rostelecom, Russian state-owned company, by the way. So it's another point of let's say controversial investments. So Armenia, every operator seeks its own way to get that connectivity, and apparently it's kind of competition on that connectivity too. As a result, we have not very reliable, very tiny channels, and with that down from time to time, and Armenia has, I would say, not reliable international connectivity at all.
And I think this is one of the first threats that people think about. From time to time, we get denial of service attacks, which degrade Armenia's external bandwidth. So I understand that this has been the main focus, but as a security guy myself, I also wonder how resilient these communication lines are to other threats, such as interception or traffic analysis.
Well, if we are talking about traffic generated by state agencies like embassies, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so official channels, there are always proper mean for encryption, using proper length of encryption key, etc. So it's to, of course, you will know who speaks with whom, but still, that's all what you know. Well, you will find out that Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs speaks with or communicates with Armenian embassy. Of course, they should communicate with each other. It's not a surprise. Yeah. As about other traffic, well, fortunately, 90% of all internet traffic is complete garbage. It's stupid movies, porn, and music. So it's nothing to analyze. In fact, though, of course, they we live in a age of the big data. Big data is a good raw material to analyze what Armenian, let's say, people watch on YouTube. Do they watch? I don't know. You should know better about that. Is it possible to analyze the people's moods based on what they watch on the YouTube or something like?
Let me complicate it a little bit. These are concerns at the layer 7 of networking. I'm also concerned about the layer 1, the physical layer, because I think, David, you were mentioning that essentially the Caucasus Online fiber is our only way out to the world.
Yes.
Right? And if that layer is cut, whether it's going to be by enemies or farmers grazing their cows, which I think has happened at least once before, about a decade ago, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what options Armenia has, or what options we should be looking into so that we have better redundancy?
Yeah, I think that's the major concern. Of course, there isn't a security threat, as Hovik mentioned. I mean, interception, DPI analysis, anything is possible. But the major threat is just cut country from internet. That's the worst thing that may happen. Frankly speaking, I don't have a solution. If I were, probably I would be genius, and I would like one of the brilliant minds of the telecommunication. I think that one of the models should be not the models. It's rather process than solution that I may speak about now. So, and the process should include strong coordination of all operators' efforts to gain. To obtain some alternative routing. As a lawyer, I may say there are 2 big differences between leasing a channel in a cable of foreign operators and owning your own cable through the entire territory of foreign countries. Because if your operator or your service provider failed to supply you internet traffic for purpose or by negligence, you may sue them and get some compensation, but that's could be covered by other benefits that they may gain from another side. So if Georgian provider was told by somebody, some adversary, okay, could you stop Armenian traffic for a half hour or couple of hours? I need it for something. You will sue and you will get some compensation that may be, covered by that adversaries maybe twice. It's not a solution. Another issue when you deal with the Georgian state, when you have your own cable passing the Georgian territory, you are a foreign investor, you have a bilateral treaty, and you will deal with Georgian state. The state is more responsible authority. Of course, state also may cut the cable, may through may run cows over that cable or ships or excavators. But again, the state is more responsible. The state authorities, they are people who understands that finally there will be a moment they might be called for responsibility. So it's more responsible way to have, and at least it's alternative. You may have both. You may have least channel over the Georgian owned cables and have your own cable passing to Georgia.
So what is the major impediment for that?
Well, I think it's very costly. First of all, it's very expensive to build a new cable. It's not easy. Georgia actually is on a way of revising its legislation. I would say it's ahead of Armenia in terms of adoption of European norm. And the Georgia now not now, but it recently enforced new legislation that made all the infrastructure available for telecommunication operators. It's famous European the European Directive on Broadband Cost Reduction. It's a directive that the European Parliament and Council adopted to reduce costs for infrastructure development to reach gigabit society by, if I'm not mistaken, 2025. So that's one of the strategic gigabit Europe goals. And that regulation was copy-pasted by Georgia. Well, roughly speaking. I mean, they did tremendous work to adopt that legislation in for Georgian legal system, and it's now in place. Armenia is just started thinking about that. Just started not even process. That's a process of thinking, maybe. Just it's not even a thinking. Yeah.
I want to tail a question on that one. This is an interesting topic you're discussing. When you were with ArmenTel and you were working with the government and everything, what was your experience in the public-private partnership component of it? You had, obviously, you were with the company, and that's the private side. But how much is the government and the legislations it makes supporting the business and the governance, the IT governance and security of the country?
Good question. Unfortunately, Armenian government usually have two major goals: squeeze money for budget and squeeze money for friends. That's how it works almost in all regulated businesses in Armenia. Because every year starts from calculation of how much money a particular agency may bring to the budget. Though officially all the regulatory authorities, Television Commission, Public Service Regulation Commission, which is telecommunication, energy, and the water supply, Commission on the Commission on Protection of Competition, they all, if you ask them, well, are you concerned about the fiscal issues? They will say no, we are not fiscal authorities. But it's not true. They all are that's not their primary goal, but they always keep in mind that they can report to president or now prime minister now that they did good job in in generating state revenue. And finally, Armenia, the regulatory authority is constantly pursue that goal when selling and rent and giving for rent frequencies, licenses, etc. So they always keep in mind that the state revenue is an issue, and because their own budget depends on that revenues too. So another issue is that I don't know how the situation have been changed after the change of Republican Party by the 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐤𝐏 fraction. But in the past, it was wide practice when, let's say, some well-connected companies lobbied government to, let's say, to force operators to build some facilities just to have a contract with the operators. So it's like somebody from Ministry of Defense said, okay, we need that cables for military reasons, and the operators have been forced to build that networks that actually have not been that necessary. Government liked it for two reasons: because of nobody wants to debate issues of network expansion with the Ministry of Defense. He will say, okay, nobody wants to debate something with Ministry of Defense in Armenia. And another issue is that, okay, that's the investment in country. Operators spend money, it's jobs for construction, it's in the context for construction, it's in revenues, employment, etc. So it was always encouraged by the all governmental authorities. So that approach to business made the entire, let's say, investment climate even worse than it was.
So David, in your opinion, one of the highest priorities for Armenia is to acquire its own fiber optic cable through Georgia. But Osped, you mentioned satellite communication before we started recording.
Well, I was, we're always reading the news, and one of the technology news that I came across was that, for example, Elon Musk is developing a satellite internet service called Starlink, and they have recently achieved broadband quality, bandwidth, and latencies. And I thought, for example, whether it's going to be with Starlink or not, would it help Armenia, for example, to have an alternative route to the outside world for its internet and data than just one landline through Georgia? Nothing against Georgia. I think that except for our dadiks cutting through cables, it has been fairly stable. But for national security reasons, it would be good to have multiple lines out to the world.
That would be the ideal solution, but I don't know much about the technology used by the Skylink. I know there's the satellite, like 10,000 satellites that will be available in different geostatic
David,
space.
by the way, you are absolutely right. He is planning to put thousands of satellites to achieve at least gigabit links to customers.
But I don't have exact technology, and I don't know how it's going to cover. Would it cover, let's say, less connected areas like Africa, or maybe, I don't know, some Asia countries, or it will go like gradually through Europe? No idea how that will go. But I think if it will be like area by area, continent by continent, I think Armenia should switch all the possible lobbies to get first on that queue, to get it first. I think it's one thing that Armenian government should also think about, and Armenian diaspora, I think, may play the role too. If somebody knows Elon Musk in person.
He's just one example, because there's a lot written about him. But the idea of a satellite service sounds interesting, because the quality of the service is coming to par.
Yeah, I know also at least two other companies invest in that. I think one is Bezos company, right? It's former Amazon.
Yeah, I think so.
And there were third. I don't remember. It's Facebook or maybe somebody else. So I know they are in a line in FCC to get the permission for rockets. I think that's.
Does Armenia have any communication satellites?
No.
No.
Armenia used to be a member of Intersat, but it was very tiny channels, and I think it gave up. They gave up that channel because it didn't make any sense to have, let's say, 100 megabit channel when your daily traffic, at least 24 gig.
Okay, very interesting. Do you have anything else to add before we end?
Maybe just one thing. I think that it's very urgent and very important task right now for Armenian government to build a team of experts to make a coordination, council group, working group maybe, to think about that alternative connectivity. Maybe think about investments, not to spend money or useless projects like smart city in 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿, which is definitely not time to do right now. But think about the connectivity, because without connectivity, all that smart cities will make no sense. That will be just sensors on the street without traffic. So I think we should think about that, and the Armenian government should think about that. Unfortunately, I don't see any move that direction, but hopefully we may make our voice heard there.
Maybe we can share this podcast with one of the government folks.
All right. Well, thank you, David and Asmed, and this was an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Avik.
Thank you, David.
That concludes this week's conversation on Groong on telecommunication security in Armenia. We look forward to your feedback, including your suggestions for conversation topics in the future. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, or on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Lara Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm 𝐒𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐿𝐽𝐿, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you soon.